We are now recording. Okay. So, this is the second class. We did Spotted Horses last time. We will be doing the first part of As I Lay Dying this time. And I told you guys to focus specifically on characters we've seen before, connections between the two works, but most of what I want to do this class is just get through what's going on and get to a decent understanding. So let's just start with first impressions, opinions. What did you guys think?
I liked it. Hesitation. Sorry.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Basically, I found the character. Obviously, this is super character driven,
Yes.
and it really focuses on not an objective viewpoint, but multiple subjective viewpoints on the same events. And what caught me immediately was how each person is distracted from the elephant in the room, or in this case, the dying woman in the room, by their own kind of I want to say selfish kind of motivations, but I mean it seems to be natural to them. It's not even a conscious selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who is the carpenter. I think it's Cash.
Cash, yeah.
Cash is concerned with not his mother dying, but the coffin he's making for her.
Yes.
Cora is just constantly talking about what she's been baking. The father, it's his wife, and he's like, can't wait to get some new teeth.
Yep.
So that just caught me off guard, that it was just there seemed to be I think one of the characters, can't remember which one said it, but they said that's the, oh man, I can't remember the last names. Like I said, I like to read a lot more usually.
Right.
But, what's the last name of the family? It starts with a B.
The Bundrins?
Yeah, the Bundrins. They say, one character speaks of another and says, oh, you're a Bundrin through and through, caring about yourself and what you're doing and no one else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It seemed to be treated not so much as a negative thing, as a matter of fact,
Yep.
a matter of life.
Sarah?
Well, I was going to say, just initially, like Bobby was saying, they're really great characters, but because we're seeing each character through their own eyes, we're not really getting unbiased opinions, which is good on the one hand, because we're getting as much of an honest answer as we can, because we're getting, what they're thinking.
Right.
You can't get more straightforward than what they're literally thinking. But everybody's coming at it from their own selfish perspective too. I think, who was the one? Cora,
Yes.
the neighbor.
Yes.
I think she seemed to be the only one who walked in and actually understood what was going on, except the doctor. The doctor guy was cool too, but he said kind of what Bobby was saying about how, why didn't you call me sooner? Was it because of the money?
Yeah.
Peabody's
Peabody's kind of wonderful and gives us a pretty great, more objective stance on what the family is doing, I think, but he's also got his own thing going on, so that's good for initial thoughts, but now let's take this a little bit more systematically and let's talk about the characters. So let's just sort them out. Get everything so we're on the same page. Who are the Bundrins?
They're nuts.
Darl. Yep, he's obviously one of our foremost narrators. Who else?
Mom's name is...
Jewel, yeah. The mother?
Yeah, her name's Addie, I think. Sorry, I really need to start using the raise hand thing.
And the dad?
Ants?
Starts with an A, yeah.
Ants.
Ants.
Bundren.
Yeah, I actually wasn't sure how to pronounce that.
Yeah, I think ants is the best way for us to deal with it. I don't think it's antsy or anything.
It's definitely not ons.
Yeah, it's definitely not ons. So who else? Darl, Jewel.
Dewey Dell.
Mm-hmm. The one girl of the children.
Cash?
Mm-hmm. And last?
Fardaman.
Yep. Alright, and then what other characters do we have wandering around the periphery?
Cora.
And what's her last name?
Tull.
Yep, this is Cora Tull. This is the wife of
Is he Vernon Tall?
He
Because I see
is-
them mention Vernon.
Yep. Vernon Tull is his name. Now, where did we...
Because I saw the daughter's name in there too.
Yeah, I think it seems, at least from what she's saying, that she's kind of hanging around the house helping out while Addie is bedridden. Alright, anyone else we need to be concerned with, especially in this section?
Dr. Peabody.
Yes.
Can I just say, I think it's hilarious that they all think he's so incredibly overweight and he's only like 200 pounds.
Well, admittedly, if you're trying to haul somebody up with a rope, he probably seems to be a lot heavier than he would otherwise, but...
I did a little bit of research on him, and I'm pretty sure he's also mentioned in The Sound and the Fury.
Yeah, Peabody's kind of the doctor for Yoknapatawpha County. At least the most respectable one. Alright, so those are the characters. We have our cast. So what are these people like? Like, let's start with Darl, because the book does, and we ought to follow him. Who is Darl? What is he like? Go ahead, Sarah.
I think Darl was my favorite, or at least for some reason he seemed the most sympathetic. He seems to be the only one who's actually trying. Like, I'm really interested to see where he goes, because it seems like he's got a lot of balls up in the air, and maybe he can't handle them all, but he still seems like a nice guy who's kind of trying to do what he thinks is the right thing.
I definitely agree with you there. And he also, one of the things that I think we should be really attentive to is his perspective. Like, obviously, it's got to be 4 or 5 chapters, even this far. He's obviously responsible for the lion's share of the narrating. So let's take a look at a couple of his chapters. So right off the bat, right from the beginning, we have Darl, and what is the first chapter about?
It's very focused on kind of taking you through the farm, and he's not so much I mean, his mom, Addie, isn't mentioned until like the very, very end. Almost like a camera that's following them while he and Jewel are walking, and the camera is just kind of like starting out really wide and kind of zooming in on their little farmhouse, and you see Cash outside sawing, which seems to really, really upset Darl throughout, by the way. Like, he constantly makes reference to Cash and the sawing and how much it's bothering him. And then at the very end, he drops that Addie Bundren could not want a better box to lie in.
What I found interesting, going off of what Kat said, was that chuck, 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 right? I mean, right there, you see that, the kind of, I mean, that's evidence of, the movement that he writes in modernism, where he's already starting to mess with form, although not as much as you might see in other writings during this period.
Right.
But he's definitely using it to effect, right? It feels like punctuation. You can hear it. It's onomatopoeia, just laid out there. And it's dropped right after what Kat said. Addie Bundren could not want a better box to lie in, right? So the reader's digesting that someone's going to die, right? It will give her confidence and comfort. I go into the house followed by the chuck, chuck, chuck of the ads, right? And I think that's really representative of his perspective in general. Like Kat said, I too had the kind of cinematic mind about his descriptions. Just the way he, standing in a litter of chips, he's fitting 2 of the boards together, right? Between the shadow spaces there are yellow as gold, like soft gold, right? There's like a warm tone to what he describes, but it's also very matter of fact.
Yeah.
And I think that's representative of him as an individual.
I think one of the other things that is really, I mean, this might be something that you didn't notice right off the bat, but Darl does describe, and that in itself is kind of unique. So many of these characters, as we said before, they're sort of lost in their own perspectives or their random thoughts. Like, that's all that we get from them. But Darl is actually doing a lot of narrating. I think it's important to keep an eye on that, like to see exactly what he's narrating in a given chapter, because it's very easy for us to sort of fall into this idea that that's what we should expect. Like, Faulkner is very abnormal in the way that he's telling this story, but Darl is surprisingly normal from a writer's standpoint, I should say. Yeah, Kat?
Elsewhere in the section that we read, I forget who it was. Maybe it was Anne's refers to this, but they describe Darl as just having his eyes and mindful of the land.
Yes.
That he's really focused on the land. Yeah, so he's like very, very kind of detail oriented. Like he's seeing all these details, he's absorbing all these details, he's reflecting on it. I mean, these are his thoughts, so he's reflecting on what everything looks like and how things are arranged, and kind of with that like gold, soft gold, he's being very very colorful in his own mental descriptions of things. Like he's very, the environment is kind of what he's more focused on rather than his own thoughts.
Yes. But notice too exactly the way that the other characters talk about Darl. Like the passage that you're looking at in Ance's section, it's about, I want to say, 2/3 of the way through what we read. There's a paragraph about midway through Ance's section, maybe a little bit earlier, and he starts it, and Darl too, taking me out of him during them. It ain't that I am afraid of work, I always has fed me and mine and kept a roof above us. Is that they would shorthand me just because he tends to his own business, just because he's got his eyes full of the land all the time. I says to them he was all right at first with his eyes full of the land, because the land laid up and down ways then. It wasn't till that 'ere road come and would switch the land around long ways, and his eyes still full of the land, that they begun to threaten me out of him, trying to shorthand me with the law. What does that mean, coming from Ance? Sarah?
Well, it sort of sounds like Ance understands where Daryl's coming from, and he used to feel the same way, but now he's been a little disillusioned by the road. You know, this modern encroachment upon his perfect little world.
Yes.
They don't seem to have much stock in modernity during this, which is funny because it's a modern novel.
Yes.
All the modernism floating around, but the family seems to be fighting it tooth and nail. You know, they're still using wagons for stuff, and they're still hauling people up the hill, you know?
Yeah. There's a place later on in the book where they're finally, you know, riding the cart to their destination, and a car drives by them, and you just get a sense of how ridiculously antiquated everything is, how completely out of touch they are. But I get the feeling, especially from this section, that that's exactly how Ance wants it. That it's modern society, it's the road, it's community infringing upon him, that he at least ascribes all of his problems to. Yeah, Kat?
I think in the Peabody chapter, he mentions about Anne's that he hadn't gone to town in forever. Here, let me find the passage of that phrase.
12 years.
All right. Well, I know I read it at some point, but yeah, it mentions that he hasn't. I think you're right, Sarah. He hasn't been to town in 12 years, so that he's so repulsed by modern
I found the
conveniences.
That's what it says. Even with the horse, it would take me 15 minutes to ride up across the pasture to the top of the ridge and reach the house. The path looks like a crooked limb blown against the bluff. Ance has not been in town in 12 years, and how his mother ever got up there to bear him, he being his mother's son. Yeah, Bobby?
One thing I noticed about that, Sarah was talking about the road and talking me out of him during them, right? As if other people have been talking down about Ance to Darl, and Darl kind of goes along with it. But the whole road thing, I mean, it's kind of, it's his land, right? He feels like he owns it in a way, right? And I think it also speaks to technology in general. Ance is a person who likes a controllable environment, right? On his land, he has the power. I mean, it's got to be something to be said about somebody who won't leave their house for 12 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, my instinct tells me it's out of a fear. So, and it just speaks to the whole thing, I says to them he was all right at first with his eyes full of the land because the land laid up and down ways then. And I don't understand what he means by that, but it sounds like an excuse. It wasn't until that air road come and switched the land around long ways and his eyes still full of land. My son's perspective hasn't changed regardless of how much the world around him has, and that concerns Ance.
Yeah. And I do think we should be very attentive in Ance's chapter to where he's just making excuses. Like, obviously, both Tull and Peabody have their suspicions about Ance's earnestness. And as we said right from the beginning, Ance is the guy whose wife is dying, and he's thinking about getting new teeth. Like, there's something off about Ance. And there are a lot of places in Ance's section where you can sort of call him out and just be like, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. Or, you know, he does seem to just be whining some of the time. Like, one of the paragraphs just short of the end, maybe about a page up. And now I gotta pay for it, me without a tooth in my head, hoping to get ahead enough so I could get my mouth fixed, where I could eat God's own victuals as a man should, and her hail and well as e'er a woman in the land until that day. Gotta pay for being put to the need of that $3. Gotta pay for the way for them boys to have to go away to earn it. He's just listing all of these things that have just wronged him. He feels very...
Yeah, look how hard my life is.
Right. He feels very persecuted, and he doesn't have any way out of it. He keeps just blaming his luck. And then very next paragraph he says, I have heard men cuss their luck, and right, for they were sinful men. But I do not say it's a curse on me, because I have done no wrong to be cussed by. I am not religious, I reckon, but peace is in my heart. I know it is. I have done things, but neither better nor worse than them that pretend other-like, and I know that old Marster will care for me as for e'er a sparrow that falls. But it seems hard that a man in his need could be so flouted by a road. What is he saying there?
Well, it really seems like just a load of excuses.
Mm-hmm.
I've done no wrong to be cussed by.
Right, what the heck is that about?
Everyone's done some sort of wrong.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, he refuses to acknowledge his flaws.
Well, no, that was basically it. He's just like listing off all these reasons why he's not getting anywhere, why his life sucks, how he was so close to getting these new teeth and then she had to go and die. You know, typical.
Yeah.
Yeah, he turns his wife's misfortune into his own.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way that's not like, oh, I am sad because my wife died, but I am sad because my wife died, and that means it's going to be more expensive and more difficult to get these teeth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She is an obstruction, not the source of my sorrow, but the obstruction in relieving them. I don't like this guy.
Ants?
Yeah.
You're not alone in that. Jumping ahead a little bit to Peabody's section, and I'm sorry if I'm hopping all over while you guys are trying to keep up, but Peabody has some absolutely wonderful lines about ants, and he will take those pot shots all over the place. At the end of Peabody's first paragraph, well, heck, even at the beginning of his paragraph, when Ants finally sent for me of his own accord, I said he has wore her out at last. And I said a damn good thing, and at first I would not go, because there might be something I could do, and I would have to haul her back, by God. What is he saying there? Yeah, Kat?
Essentially that if he goes and is able to save Addie, then he will save her, but in the act of saving her life, he will have not really saved her at all.
Exactly.
He'll just be leaving her to Anne's, and implying that he's kind of like worked her to death, not just maybe working the farm, but just wore her down in some way, probably physically and spiritually, because he seems like a bad person.
At the very least, a lazy person.
Yeah, well, they said he never sweats.
Yes. What does he think will happen if he sweats?
He'll die.
Yep. Sarah?
What an excuse.
Well, going along with that about how it seemed like he worn her down, the one thing that really struck me was when Peabody walked in, he said that she'd already been dead for 10 days, but she was still just kind of sitting there.
Right, and why does he say that?
Something about her eyes. I don't remember exactly how they phrased it, but like her eyes were the only part of her that were still alive. Yeah.
He's got a line right there where he walks in and he says, "The girl is standing by the bed fanning her. When we enter, she turns her head and looks at us. She has been dead these 10 days. I suppose it's having been a part of Ants for so long that she cannot even make that change, if change it be." Like, he's saying that basically the life that she was living is not so far removed from death, and she can't make the switch. Like, it's it's too close. And he goes on.
Not even that it's too close, but Ance's refusal to change has like gone so far as to bend natural law in his own house.
Exactly. And part of that is just
keep
Peabody
saying...
being sly, but I think there is a certain truth to it at the same time. Yeah, Kat?
Everybody keeps making reference to how Addie will wait.
Yeah.
That like, oh, well, we'll get the wagon and we'll get her to where she wants to be buried. She'll wait. Or, oh, yeah, go ahead and make $3. She'll wait, as if she can just, like, put off her own death until it's convenient for them. And they're justifying, like, oh, she's not going to want to die until she knows that Jewel is here, but they're making it like she's going to hold off for them. Like, it's extremely selfish.
Yes. Yeah, Sarah?
It just occurred to me, like, what was this woman's life like? If this is what her death is like, and everybody being super selfish and assuming she's waiting for their convenience, what was her life like, and why has she not died before now?
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
I know that sounds horrible, but
that's totally
really
what Peabody is suggesting, though. Like, you are right with Peabody there.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, Bobby?
Well, the way I see it, it's like, it's one of two, it's on a spectrum with one or two absolutes. The one absolute is that she was just like Mama Brady and like no one appreciated her and you know they all stepped on her and they just said, oh, she'll wait her entire life like she did now. However, there's also the idea that perhaps Darl resents her in some way for something she did and she's just as selfish as the rest of them. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily a bad person, just very me.
Right. She could just be every bit as bad as everyone else in this novel.
Yeah, and she could have... Darl could resent her for some reason. Like, you know, it's not unheard of somebody refusing to be around when somebody's passing away, as horrible as it sounds.
Right. But I think one of the interesting things is... especially...
It's the money.
Yeah. It's the money, and it's also Jewel. Yeah, Kat?
Oh, just building on what Bobby said, there are certain places in which they kind of imply that she's either actually is just as bad as the rest of them or is perceived as bad as the rest of them because of the way in which she's been watching Cash make her coffin, and he like holds up every piece to make sure that she approves.
Yeah, there is something really strange about that. And it's also interesting to see how the characters respond to it. Like, we all mentioned that Darl is very preoccupied with it. He keeps bringing us back to Cash sawing on the boards. What about the other characters? What's Jewel's take on the building of the coffin?
He hates it too.
Yes.
He hates it too because that's in the section right above the section where we're at right now. And he says it's because he stays out there right under the window hammering and sawing on that goddamn box.
Yep.
And he like goes on for a while about like I told him to go somewhere else. Like, do you want to see her in it? He feels even more passionately about it than Darl. Darl seems to be annoyed mostly by just the sound. Like the sound is bugging him, but Jewel is bugged by the idea that Cash is building this coffin underneath her window and showing her all the pieces.
Yeah, it's everyone's an asshole. It just feels like that. Like, well, because Cash is there, he's doing this carpentry because he knows it's what he's good at, or at least I remember that being indicated.
Yeah.
Like that's what he's gifted with. And it seems like he's not doing it for her approval so much as he's doing it so he can be most approved.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You do get
like
the sense that Cash is trying to be the golden boy here. Like,
yeah.
He wants to be the favorite.
And for one reason or another, everyone, whether it's because, like, he's being obnoxious about it or they can see right through him, everyone else is annoyed at him for this. And it's funny, you don't really ever really get a reaction out of Addie. I mean, except for that moment where she stands up.
Yeah. And what does she do when that happens? It's another one of Darl's sections, and then Dewey Dell is the one who says it's Jewel she wants. Ance explains that he and Darl have both gone out, and then she says Cash, and calls him over and wants to see the box. Sarah?
Okay, two things. First of all, I didn't read any further, so I'm really curious, do we ever get a section where we hear what Cash is thinking?
We get a couple, and they're very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm guessing that would be really interesting because I just went and I flipped back through, and we don't really hear anything from him. Like, I don't even know if he has any actual dialogue in the section that we read,
I don't think
unless I
so.
just missed it.
He's
Yeah.
almost always off sawing the box at this point.
Yeah, it's funny when she says you cash, he just says, "Yeah, I'm building it." See?
Yeah. He
He
holds,
doesn't come
he
in.
holds up the board to the window, and that's it.
Yeah. I'm also getting kind of a weird Jacob and Esau vibe off all these brothers. I know there's several of them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also this, someone is obviously trying to curry favor with one parent, someone else is trying to get the other parent on board. There's some weird sibling rivalry going on here too, because everyone's talking about how Jewel was the one that they really wanted and worked so hard for, but then, Cash is the one actually doing the work.
Yep.
It's got some interesting dynamics going on.
Yes. There's some big stuff that happens with all the family members, don't get me wrong. Suffice it to say for now, yes, there's a lot of conflicts within and among the brothers. And just as another structural note, Sarah, it's true that Cash doesn't have a single section at this point. His introduction is fairly late. But as another side note, I'm pretty sure the chapter that we saw of Jules is the only one he will narrate in the whole book.
Oh.
Yeah. Kat, you had something?
Yeah, just it kind of goes along with what we were saying about the sibling rivalry, and just also the section on Darl where he's essentially like encouraging them to go on this quest to get $3.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone seems to think that Darl is the one that cares the most about Addie, and he doesn't want to say goodbye. This is from like Cora's perspective.
Yeah, Cora has
that
her
she
section where she
sees.
sees it. Yep.
From her perspective, Darl doesn't want to go, and it's Anne's and Jewel who are money grubbers and want to make the money. But Darl is the one who wanted to go and get the $3. Jewel, he seems to care the most about his mother because he is so passionate about this coffin issue, the coffin being built under her window, and feels the strongest about it. He doesn't really seem to want to go.
Darl or Jewel?
Jewel,
Mm-hmm.
to go get the money.
Did you see in that discussion, Jewel has a couple of lines there. What is his take on it?
He doesn't think she's sick.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. I think if he did understand the gravity of the situation, he wouldn't have gone. But he's mad about the coffin, and he says, right, it's in the section, he says, "Ma ain't that sick."
Mm-hmm.
Shut up, Darl.
Yeah, there's a lot of shut up, Darl.
Yeah.
But even later in the section, he says if everybody wasn't burning hell to get her there, with Cash all day long right under her window, hammering and sawing at that, and that's where he gets cut off. But he's clearly not on board with what's going on.
Is it because he can't? Is it because he can't or won't accept it? Or maybe he really honestly doesn't know.
It could be any number of those factors. I don't think it's quite clear-cut. But I also think that in the same way that Ance is so stubborn that he thinks that Addie's just going to hang on, it's the same thing with Jewel. He's so stubborn he can't imagine that she's actually sick. Like, they both expect natural law to conform to their wills rather than proceeding according to its own law. I assume everybody saw the scene that I read from last class where Jewel is interacting with his horse. And how does he treat the horse?
They seem to just have this kind of standoff. Like, he calls the horse, and it's there, and it uses the same language to describe the horse as we saw in the other horse story. It's gaudy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This glinting for a gaudy instant.
Well,
and then he has to wrestle with the horse the way the Texan had to wrestle with the horses.
Mm-hmm. But notice
And he
who is telling us this? Whose section is this?
Darl.
Yeah, Darl.
Is Darl in the barn?
No, I guess he's just imagining it.
Is he?
Oh, like, it's so weird.
It's.
Where is he?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just found it and I'm looking through. It seems like this is. I didn't catch this the first time I read through, but it seems like this is something that he's seen before. Yeah, it says he was down there fooling with that horse. He will go on through the barn into the pasture. The horse will not be in sight. It sounds like this is something that he's seeing in his mind, and it's easy because he's seen it before. Like, this is how he harnesses the team every time. Like, he has to go through this whole song and dance with the horse every time. And they later say that Jewel's the only one who can handle the horse. When the doctor shows up and wants to ride the horse, they're like, nope, sorry.
So, if Darl is just speaking from long had experience on this one, what about the last Darl section? It starts, Pa stands beside the bed. From behind his leg, Vardaman peers with his round head and his eyes round and his mouth beginning to open. Where is Darl?
He's already gone, or at least he should be.
Note that it's the second paragraph where Dewey Dell says that it's Jewel she wants, and Pa, Ants, responds, "Why, Addie, him and Darl went to make one more load. They thought there was time, that you would wait for them, and that $3 and all." Darl is narrating his own absence.
That's really weird.
Yes. But also notice there are a couple places in this section where it changes to italics, at least in my copy. I would assume it's the same.
Yeah,
way.
no, it does that.
What's going on in those sections? If we look at the first one of the italicized sections, so we have what has happened in the main non-italicized section is this is right where Addie has passed away. We have Dewey Dell flings herself across the bed. The whole mattress sort of shakes a little bit. We have Vardaman who's like stunned, and we have Ants sitting there completely useless as usual. And his last words are, "Durn them boys." And then we have Darl starts narrating. "Jewel, I say, overhead the day drives level and gray, hiding the sun by a flight of gray spears. In the rain the mules smoke a little, splashed yellow with mud, the off one clinging and sliding lunges to the side of the road above the ditch. The tilted lumber gleams dull yellow, water-soaked and heavy as lead, tilted at a steep angle into the ditch above the broken wheel. About the shattered spokes and about Jewel's ankles a runnel of yellow, neither water nor earth, swirls, curving with the yellow road neither of earth nor water, down the hill dissolving into a steaming mass of dark green, neither of earth nor sky. Jewel, I say." So what's happening?
It almost seems like he knows what's happening even though he isn't there.
At least imagining it?
At least imagining it. Like, maybe he senses that his mother died, and he's like, "Jewel, you need to stop and listen. Mom just died." I don't know. This is where I start to get grumpy with Faulkner.
Okay, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Well, it imagines an accident is basically what it seems like.
The wheel is broken. Presumably the cart is not moving. And the emphasis on how neither water nor earth, neither earth nor water, it seems to me like the wagon is stuck in the mud. And there he is talking to Jewel. Keep saying Jewel. And then in the next section, he's got a little bit more description, but at the last section, literally the last thing I assigned, we have Jewel's hat droops limp about his neck, channeling water onto the soaked tow sack tied about his shoulders as, ankle deep in the running ditch, he pries with a slipping 2x4 with a piece of rotting log for fulcrum at the axle. "Jewel, I say, she is dead, Jewel. Addie Bundren is dead."
Like, don't bother, maybe?
You kind of get a sense of that, but there's a couple of things going on. For one, we have Jewel, and forgive me, there's not evidence for this, but I'm kind of imagining Darl sitting on the cart as Jewel is trying to prop it out of the mud. Like, there's this sense of him being completely not helpful while Jewel is trying to move heaven and earth to get this cart unstuck. And while we get this idea that Darl is trying to inform him, like, "Jewel, she's dead," maybe it's earnest, maybe he's honestly trying to tell him, but maybe he's not. Maybe this is goading. Like, you get the...
That got dark.
Yeah. You get the feeling that Jewel is doing something, at least. And there's Darl, eyes full of the land. His mind is somewhere else. And while, admittedly, Darl is where he needs to be, because the important thing is where Darl is trying to get to, he's definitely not got his mind on where he is. But also notice the section right before Peabody's. There's a short Darl section there. Do you see it? It starts, "He has been to town this week. The back of his neck is trimmed close with a white line between hair and sunburn like a joint of white bone."
Okay,
The
got it.
second paragraph in this section, he says, "Jewel, I say. Back running, tunneled between the two sets of bobbing mule ears, the road vanishes beneath the wagon as though it were a ribbon and the front axle were a spool. Do you know she is going to die, Jewel? It takes two people to make you and one people to die. That's how the world
Yeah, it's
is
kind of
going."
a mocking tone.
Yeah. And this isn't it. He keeps going. Like, after that paragraph, he talks to Dewey Dell, and he says, "You want her to die so you can get to town, is it?" Now he's challenging Dewey Dell. It's the same thing. And then at the end of this section, he's back to Jewel. "Jewel, I say, do you know that Addie Bundren is going to die? Addie Bundren is going to die."
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching
Exactly.
you. It's weird. Darl's kind of nasty too.
I mean, I know we all started out thinking that Darl was kind of a decent guy, and I don't want to completely dissuade you, because Darl does seem like the only person with a decent head on his shoulders half of this book. Alright, now, there are two more things I want to touch on, and then we can call it a night. The first one I want to go over is Dewey Dell's section, because it's basically unreadable and is really important. It starts out, "The first time me and Leif picked on down the row. Pa doesn't sweat because he will catch his death from the sickness, so everybody that comes to help us. And Jewel don't care about anything. He is not kin to us in caring, not care kin. And Cash like sawing the long, hot, sad yellow days up into planks and nailing them to something. And Pa thinks because neighbors will always treat one another that way because he has always been too busy letting neighbors do for him to find out. And I did not think that Darl would, that sits at the supper table with his eyes gone further than the food and the lamp, full of the land dug out of his skull and the holes filled with distance beyond the land." Now, obviously, I'm not going to try and make sense of half of that, but we see echoes of it in a lot of what other people have to say. But this is where we really need to pay attention. "We picked on down the row, the woods getting closer and closer, and the secret shade, picking on into the secret shade with my sack and Leif's sack. Because I said, will I or won't I, when the sack was half full, because I said if the sack is full when we get to the woods, it won't be me. I said if it don't mean for me to do it, the sack will not be full, and I will turn up the next row, but if the sack is full, I cannot help it. It will be that I had to do it all the time, and I cannot help it. And we picked on toward the secret shade, and our eyes would drown together, touching on his hands and my hands, and I didn't say anything." What's going on?
I think they're hooking up.
Okay, why
And
do you
she's
say that?
playing a does he love me, does he love me not kind of thing.
Kat?
I was kind of thinking the same thing, that like, if the sack is full when we get to the end of the row, I'll have sex with this guy, but if it's not, then I won't.
Okay, and what happens?
He fills
It's
up the
full.
sack.
Yes, he
He
starts
fills it
picking the cotton into her sack. And as she says, and so it was full when we came to the end of the row, and I could not help it.
Yeah, and they keep talking about that secret shade and everything. It's like, yeah.
What happens when Addie finally passes away? What is Dewey Dell's response? Again, assuming we can trust Darl.
Throws herself in her mom's body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's a complete mess.
Right, but then what happens? When is the next time that we see her?
They are, like Daryl's imagining that they're gonna ask her to go make dinner. That their father's gonna ask her to go make dinner, and that the doctor is going to tell her to go make dinner.
Well, of course, she's the woman of the house now. That is her job.
Yeah.
Yeah, get up off your grieving, throwing yourself on your dead mom, and make us some dinner.
It's right about a page or two in my copy before the end of the section that I had you read. I reckon you better get supper on, he says, meaning ants. Dewey Dell does not move. Get up now and put supper on, Pa says. We gotta keep our strength up. I reckon Dr. Peabody's right hungry coming all this way, and Cash will need to eat quick and get back to work so he can finish it in time. Dewey Dell rises, heaving to her feet. She looks down at the face. It is like a casting of faded bronze upon the pillow, the hands alone still with any semblance of life, a curled, gnarled inertness, a spent yet alert quality from which weariness, exhaustion, travail has not yet departed, as though they doubted even yet the actuality of rest, guarding with horned and penurious alertness the cessation which they know cannot last. Dewey Dell stoops and slides the quilt from beneath them and draws it up over them to the chin, smoothing it down, drawing it smooth. Then, without looking at Pa, she goes around the bed and leaves the room. But what's being emphasized in this section where Darl is talking about Addie? How does Darl describe Addie's dead body?
Tired.
Exactly. As though they doubted even yet the actuality of rest, guarding with horned and penurious alertness the cessation which they know cannot last. And then what does Dewey Dell do?
Now Dewey Dell's gonna be the tired one.
Yeah.
Ooh, harsh.
Gosh, this is depressing.
Welcome to Faulkner.
The great thing about Faulkner is that it's incredibly entertaining until you start sort of digging deeper, and then everything gets really bleak really fast. Alright, there's one more little bit about Dewey Dell I want to touch on. Back to Darl's section. This is right after Ance's section and right before Peabody's. It's just a short little one-page thing. It starts, he has been to town this week. The back of his neck is trimmed close with a white line between hair and sunburn, like a joint of white bone. Darl has a conversation with Dewey Dell in this section. He tells us, I said to Dewey Dell, you want her to die so you can get to town, is that it? She wouldn't say what we both knew. The reason you will not say it is, this in quotes, the reason you will not say it is, when you say it, even to yourself, you will know it is true, is that it? But you know it is true now. I can almost tell you the day when you knew it is true. Why won't you say it, even to yourself? She will not say it, now out of quotes. She will not say it, she just keeps on saying, are you going to tell Pa? Are you going to kill him? In quotes, you cannot believe it is true because you cannot believe that Dewey Dell Bundren could have such bad luck. Is that it? What's he talking about?
Oh, snap.
She's pregnant.
Oh, snap.
So why does Dewey Dell need to go to town?
Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh. She's gotta go get an abortion.
I thought she wanted to go see her boyfriend. Man.
Alright, so, last question, subject to deal with, and then we can call it a night, and hopefully we won't cut out before that happens. What is being given to us with the continuity here? How does As I Lay Dying and Spotted Horses fit together? And what makes each work richer because they're both taking place with the same cast and the same setting? Kat?
How do you say the county?
Yoknapatawpha.
Yoknapatawpha.
Yep.
It seems like it's kind of setting between the two stories, the thing that overlaps the most, besides the like very bleakness of the description of things, but the county is full of very, very selfish and not very smart people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they get caught up in all these little things. Like in the story about the horses, they were so caught up in the bid for horses that nobody actually wanted.
Right.
And then trying to catch all of these crazy horses, and then trying to reconcile whose fault it is these crazy horses went on rampage. And now, in this kind of bubble of the same universe, you have a woman is dying, and everybody's working around it, but they're not really addressing it how you would expect a family to address it. Like, you'd expect them to want to be near her and enjoy with her last moments, like to make sure that they can get the very fullest experience of her last moments, and yet they're all running around trying to make $3 and make a coffin and all of this other nonsense. Like, they seem very selfish and silly, just all of the residents of this one county.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling echoes of Twain in this story.
Yep, you'll see a lot of that in Faulkner. The two
Just
are
like,
pretty similar.
hey America, this is how you are. Don't you feel stupid? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I think Faulkner's a little bit less directly satirical.
preachy. Yeah.
Like, Twain obviously has an agenda every time he sets pen to paper, I'd say. Like, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah. But Faulkner, I think, he's much more descriptive than prescriptive. At least as far as I can tell. There's definitely some very cutting social commentary, and he will not pull any punches. But I think more often than not, he kind of observes. He's busy observing the situation rather than trying to pass judgment or even make a recommendation on how.
Not to mention, it feels like it's on a smaller scale.
Yeah. Like, as the story progresses, you'll see that Faulkner has a sort of epic scope in mind, but it is always a small scale. Like, his tone may be elevated, his storytelling may assume this sort of grandiose proportion, but it's always going to be about people, as people. Rarely is he going to stoop to social commentary, so to speak.
It seems less about like this style of America, like less about backwoods country America, and just more specifically about this community.
Mm-hmm.
Less broad, more specific to this particular community.
Yeah. I think there are
Yeah,
places where he's dealing with things on a more symbolic or large-scale level, but I think, at the very least, he's always talking about the community first. It's not
human interaction, person to person.
Yes, exactly.
Not like trying to comment on like an American movement or imperialism or slavery.
Yep.
But rather on like, well, how do we treat each other just on a basic level?
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
Any last words, final comments, observations?
It does seem like kind of a fantastic parting shot from Addie that everyone assumes she's going to wait around for when it's convenient for her to die, and now she's going to completely inconvenience all of them.
Yes.
Like, in the biggest way possible. Like, even the doctor was complaining about how it was inconvenient that he had to come up the hill right now when it's about to rain.
In the middle of the cyclone, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know what's going to happen next. I haven't actually read it. I just know, from reputation from the back of the book, she's going to make them carry her coffin 40 miles into town. And I'm like, that's kind of awesome.
It is. It really is. And just wait.
Well, that's a long journey if you think about it.
It is, especially in a horse or a couple of mules and a wagon. And they don't take the most direct route.
Of course not.